into the DNVR Rockies Podcast, brought to you by Strava Craft Coffee. Strava Craft Coffee can now be delivered to your doorstep every 2, 4, 6, or 8 weeks. And now you get 25% off your first purchase when you use code DNVR25 over at StravaCraftCoffee.com. I'm your host, Patrick Lyons, and joining me today, as he does every single week, is the voice of the Colorado Rockies on AT&T SportsNet, the host of the Drew Goodman podcast, and author of If These Walls Could Talk, Stories from the Colorado Rockies. It's Drew Goodman.
Yes, with my buddy Ben Hockman. How you doing, man?
Pretty good. Staying warm, doing the best.
Good.
Enjoying some college baseball. That's been fun.
I was in Memphis over the weekend for 3 days watching college baseball, watching my middle son play, and going to St. Louis in a couple days to watch more college baseball. College baseball is great. And I'm not just saying that because I've had my kids play college baseball. It's more they play with great energy, great passion. I think in the we follow college football naturally really closely and college basketball really closely, as we should. I hope more games, a ton of games are obviously streamed, but I hope more games continue to be televised and people who love the sport see how well it's played, because there's not saying there's not the three true outcomes, but there's less of it. There's less striking out. There's more strategy. There's a lot of energy on the field. There's a collegiate atmosphere. So I love college baseball, and now with the absence of Major League Baseball, I hope some people are gravitating toward that and realizing what a great product it is at many different levels.
And I think they're realizing how pure of a form it is, because again, these are amateurs that are just going out to play. They're grinding, they're having fun, they're being creative in the various ways that they, celebrate success. And so, like you said, with college football, there is an avenue for people to tap into that frequently, because Saturday, that's what's going on, even Thursdays and Friday nights sometimes. Whereas with the MLB season, even during spring training, you got 15 games going on every single day, basically. And so you're not allowed that same room to keep an eye on that, or even the minors. But now that's definitely one of the benefits. And I think people are enjoying it and saying, wow, man, college baseball is really good.
Yeah, and I don't think people realize, or maybe fully realize would be the more appropriate way of describing it, just how good college baseball is. Again, at all levels, there's you'd be surprised. People go out there and say, wow, these guys are really good, and this is high-level baseball being played. So, again, I hope some people, either stream or find some places to watch college baseball.
Did you see some of the video of the players from Vanderbilt and their fancy new watches? I'm curious of your take on that. And for anyone who doesn't know, because I haven't talked about it yet on the podcast, is in college baseball, they do have a way to allow for players to, have some kind of communication devices. We know that in the past, I think in spring training, certainly last year in the Arizona Fall League, there was going to be some pitcher-catcher communication, a system that ultimately, wasn't really adopted too much by the players. But, look, technology is advancing, and so you might as well tap into that in a sense. And so Vanderbilt's saying, hey, let's go all in with these watches that break down maybe positioning, the count, what pitches are being called, so that everyone could be in the right place at the right time, and they can communicate that much quicker too.
Yeah, and because it is an expedient way of getting information to your defense and letting them know what pitch was called, et cetera, I have no issue with it. At all. I mean, you want players to know, hey, is it breaking ball? Is it heater? What pitch is coming, and to be able to align accordingly. I have no issue. Now we're seeing guys always reach in their hat or their back pocket for alignment defensively. You see it in the college game all the time, guys. I see third base coaches, because they change it so quickly, or typically the head coach, looking at their wrist to see, where their touches should be, indicating what, because they change it day to day, especially when you're playing same school in a series. So, that's part of the fun of college baseball also. I really, believe that.
And I think some people would say, oh, got to be careful with the technology. It's a slippery slope. But anytime we're talking about a slippery slope, you say, well, there's a couple phases of it. And if you're okay with giving a little bit of an allowance to start, I mean, sure, maybe people will want to push the bar and you can communicate different signs that get stolen in the next phase, but it doesn't necessarily have to get to that spot. For right now, for what it is to keep the game moving along and to communicate with players, I think it's totally fine.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's been exciting to be able to watch that. And one of the exciting topics in the last 24 hours in the Rockies world is the Mount Rushmore. MLB Network Radio was doing it. I heard you on there giving your, top 4 guys when it comes to the Colorado Rockies. And it's strange to say that it's almost easy to really think of the 4 best players in franchise history. And everyone's going to have their own list. If you're thinking about, who provided better memories, or if you didn't get a chance to see X, Y, and Z play, maybe you might not favor them and you want to slip one of your guys in. But it's an interesting topic to think about. Maybe who's close, really? Who has a plaque on the monument?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's easy, and I don't think that's an indictment of the Rockies per se. I think it has to do with the relative youth of their franchise. I mean, you're talking about going into their 30th season, and you have 2 no-brainers in Walker and Helton. They'll be on everybody's list. There's unanimity, I would think, there. And then after that, to your point, the 2 guys I put on there, I'll tell you right now. And then there's a fairly significant list of high honorable mention for me. And the 2 other guys I put on there were Nolan and Tulo. And the criteria that I used overall, you had to play here for a significant period of time. Andres Galarraga was maybe one of their first big stars. Obviously hit 370 in 1993. He hit a bunch of home runs, but he was here for 5 years. Great, wonderful. It's part of the big cat. El Gato Grande is part of the history of the Rockies and should be celebrated. But he's not one of the 4 greatest in my mind because, Nolan was here 8 years and 8, ridiculously great years. Mm-hmm. And both ways, by the way, offensively and, as we know, defensively. And Tulowitzki's a guy that I think because Story, has been so good, it almost diminishes or we forget just how great Tulowitzki was. And it's so unfortunate that he got hurt, whether his career finished in Colorado or not, or Toronto, and then on briefly with the Yankees. He had Hall of Fame talent, and he was playing at a Hall of Fame level for a good period of time, all of that time with the Rockies, not incidentally. And had he not gotten hurt, he would have been a future Hall of Famer. I don't think there's any question. So for me, it was Tulo and Nolan with high honorable mention, to Cargo. You can mention, you could certainly throw Galarraga on there. There's honorable mention. Charlie Blackmon, high honorable mention. I mean, he's the only current guy that, probably gives you pause. But Cargo, 10 years, 5 of those 10 years, as you know, Patrick, because you study this stuff left and right. 5 of those 10 years, Cargo is one of the best players in the game. And in 2010, he probably was the best player in the game. He didn't win an MVP, but he won the Players' Choice Award as voted on by his peers as the best player, not just in the National League, but in Major League Baseball.
It's interesting what you say about Tulowitzki and Story, because it's funny if you just go by, let's say, wins above replacement, at least as a jumping off point. Trevor Story's 5th, and yet he's 5th in the Rockies franchise. Yet, he deserves an honorable mention, but I think because of the fact that overshadowed by Nolan Arenado. So you say, okay, he's behind him in the depth chart and behind Tulo in the depth chart. It's not the conversation isn't as easy to have to put him in. But you're right. Tulo leaves in 2015 when he gets traded, and Rockies fans don't have an opportunity to go, man, remember how great it was to have a power hitting shortstop that could steal a couple bases and had some great highlights defensively? Those were the days. They don't have a chance to catch their breath before, Story's hitting 2 home runs on opening day in 2016.
Yeah. And that obviously, I think if the Rockies had a string of shortstops or just solid contributors and not another bona fide superstar, who was a power hitting guy as well, who ran a lot better than Tulo. I mean, Tulo stole some bases early in his career, but I mean, Trevor's one of the fastest guys in baseball. It was such a unique, situation to go, a 15, 16-year run where you had, two really great ones. The reason I would put Tulo in front of Trevor right now is that Trevor will have played, unless something changes, and we all hope that does. But if Trevor's played his last game in a Rockies uniform, he played 6 years in a Rockies uniform. Tulowitzki, again, we forget this. He played 10 years. He parts of 10 years with the Rockies. And the other thing I looked at, Patrick, and I'll be interested to hear, your take on this as well. The Rockies have had a modicum of success in terms of going to the postseason. 95, they did it faster at the time than any expansion franchise. But the best period for the Rockies, I think the best teams they ever had were 07 through really 2010. 2010 team fell apart the last 2 weeks of the season, unfortunately. 2009 was a great team. The team that went the furthest, as we know, is 2007. Who was the starting shortstop during that period of time? Who was the, one of the two leaders during that time? Troy Tulowitzki. In fact, so much so that Dan O'Dowd, I remember him telling me that he felt he had one of the greatest leadership sets at the time of any young player he'd ever been around. And it's why the Rockies, we're looking at the, what's going on down in Florida and Jupiter, and hopefully they can get their, both sides can come to some sort of agreement here in the not too distant future. But one of the things that, the Players Association understandably want is an avenue for young players who are great to get paid earlier than is currently the system. Dan O'Dowd was, and obviously Dick Monfort was proactive. They paid him, I want to say it's like $160 million extension or something along those lines very early on when they didn't have to, really celebrating, his greatness on the field and what they felt he brought in the clubhouse.
Yeah, that was certainly not innovative at the time, but it wasn't as rare where you're committing, you're giving that guaranteed money, which I think people forget sometimes when, you can control player's contract, or his contract has team control for 6 years. That it doesn't mean he's locked in on those 6 years, because you know what, if he gets hurt, you can pull the plug on it, and it's not guaranteed. But the Rockies, they put their money where their mouth was, and they gave him that guaranteed deal. And that, that still was something that worked out. They did it with Cargo too. That worked out really well. We've seen it recently with Charlie Blackmon and Germán Marquez. And I do want to talk about Charlie Blackmon here for a little bit, but got to remind everybody to head on down to the DNVR bar on the corner of Colfax, New York, where we have Nuggets and Avs watch parties going on all week long through the weekend, even Sunday night. You can come down to watch the Nuggets. If you're a member, you get that member-sized beer, a little bit extra, few more ounces there in your glass. You can't pass that up. And now it's only 50 cents for your first month at the DNVR.com. And if you're ready to go all in on the annual membership, you get a free t-shirt while you're at it. For those hoops fans out there, got to let you know about the latest offer from DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. It's that if you bet just $1 on any team, whether they're the favorite or the underdog, you can win $150 in free bets if they win. It's that simple. DraftKings Sportsbook customers can also get in on the game and bet on the NBA's same game parlays. You've heard me talk about it before, but for anyone who doesn't know, it's where you just bet multiple things in the same game so you get a bigger payout, even if it's, odds that Nikola Jokic, is he going to score more than 20 points? Yeah, of course. So it's not going to really pay out that much. But if you stack a couple more things, how many rebounds he's going to get, how many assists, whatever it may be, you can win more. DraftKings is safe, secure, and reliable. Best of all, you can deposit and withdraw your cash whenever you want. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code DNVR to bet just $1 on any NBA team and get $150 in free bets if you win. That's promo code DNVR at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Must be 21 or older. Colorado only. New customers only. Minimum $5 deposit. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-522-4700. And you can watch along with the Nuggets or Avalanche if you've got Avaca TV. You've heard us talk about it now for a little over a week, and it's something you need to tap into. They've got all the local networks, including Altitude Sports. It's a totally new paradigm for TV delivery that's less expensive and more efficient while offering a superior picture than some of those legacy providers. They're offering it in Denver, Colorado Springs, Phoenix, Boise, Twin Falls, Idaho, all up and down the Rocky Mountain region. All you need is an antenna and a Vaca smart receiver, and you can get ABC, NBC, Fox, CW right here in Denver. And yeah, most importantly, did I mention they've got Altitude Sports? They make it easy to follow the Colorado teams you love, including the Nuggets, Avalanche, Rapids, Mammoth, including some college with Rams, Pioneers, baseball, too. Well, how do you sign up for Vaca TV? All you got to do is go to avaca.tv/DNVR, and at only $25 per month plus a receiver, no contracts, no hidden fees, you lock it in for 2 years, you can have all of your Denver sports once and for all. So, Goody, with Charlie Blackmon, I'd written an article a couple weeks ago about the fact that he's been on the Rockies for a very long time. I think there's only about 7 players who've been with their current organization longer in some capacity. Like we're talking Yadier Molina, Adam Wainwright, Joey Votto, not very many. And so he's been around. He's Mr. Rocky 2.0 in so many ways. And although a lot of the flashier numbers might not be there for him, you know, he has to be in that conversation when you're talking about the greatest Rockies players of all time on that cusp of being on the Mount Rushmore, because he's just been doing it so consistently for so long.
I would agree. And that's why I kind of threw that category out there. High honorable mention. You can only take 4. And, you know, let's hypothetically say that Charlie has, you know, beyond his mid-30s now, has some sort of bounce back year. Because we all know what kind of shape he stays in and how dedicated to his craft that he is. And, you know, let's say he has a 24 home run season this year and continues, you know, you might go, hey, we're going to have to take Nolan off the list or Tulo off the list. There's no way you're ever taking Helton or Walker off there. There's just no way. And because both are going to be Hall of Famers, as we've now learned with Todd, we're, you know, pretty sure that will occur at some point in the next, you know, 2 to 4 or 5 years, right? But you know, maybe at some point Charlie's right there to your, you know, to the points you made when you put him in print.
Yeah, he's, you know, going to be number 2 in virtually every category, right? Hits, he's right there. I mean, could even pass Dexter Fowler for most triples if that means something to you. You know, he's
not a lot, but go ahead, continue.
It's a fun one though to think about it. You know, again, having so many of those team records, but I think what speaks to him, and again, so much of it is true for the Todd Helton in the Hall of Fame conversation. I think you make it true for Charlie Blackmon in the all-time top 4 Rockies conversation. He's still on the outside looking in, but you look at the, you know, 22,000 or so players that have ever played in the big leagues. And I love, you know, you were the first one who ever really kind of captured, I believe, because you'd frequently say on broadcast, right? Like the lower bowl at Coors Field. That's every ball player of all time can basically just fit in that lower bowl. And so 22,000 you think is a lot on one hand, and on another you go, oh, that's it. You could fit them all in one general block in downtown Denver. And yeah, you can. So you take all those players, and how many have over 1,400 career base hits and have done it with only one baseball team? And there's not very many. There's only 79, and over half of those guys are Hall of Famers. So, you know, once you start kind of parsing the numbers out a little bit, you begin to see like, wow, man, Charlie is really, really special.
He is. And I'm looking at some numbers right now. This is his age 35 season. He'll be in the middle of the summer. He'll turn 36, July 1st, right? You know, right prior to the All-Star break. And why am I not finding this? He's
sitting right at 300 too for a career.
Right.
So that's one where, again, he's going to want to go on the other end of the spectrum and keep it above 300. But you know, that happens in players' career. It happened to Mickey Mantle where he couldn't stay there.
And he'll play 2 more years because this is the final year of his deal. There's an option, but it's a player option for 2023. Now, I'm assuming, barring something unforeseen, Charlie's going to say, yeah, absolutely. I'm going to take whatever's left on that, deal he originally signed. And was it a 5-year, $98 million deal? He'll take that. So he's going to play 2 more years. So he'll end up playing 13 years in a Rockies uniform. Currently he sits at 300, an OPS plus of 114, which is, comparable to Cargo in his 10 years, 116 OPS plus. I mean, you know what the numbers are. He's been a great Rocky, and wildly popular because he's he's an interesting cat. He's a bright cat. He's got the beard, which makes him so recognizable. Cargo on that list scored extra points for me because of how he carried himself, how he was adored, how he raised the level of the clubhouse. The chemistry factor. So those guys are high. They're knocking at the door. But for me right now, I had Tulowitzki and I had Nolan because Tulowitzki. I'll fall back on this again, Patrick. Tulowitzki was on a Hall of Fame trajectory, and Nolan will be a Hall of Famer. Nolan will be a Hall of Famer if he plays another year or two. Even right now, if he's getting close to the Kirby Puckett Hall of Famer, right? With all due respect to the late Kirby Puckett, who played just 10 years in the big leagues, but became a Hall of Famer because it was an extraordinary 10 years before the glaucoma got him, and then sadly he passed away not long after that. But Nolan, there'd be a pretty interesting debate if for some reason Nolan only played 10 years and some significant injury got him as to whether or not he's a Hall of Famer. You probably could make a convincing case he still deserved to be in.
It's that conversation between dominating, particularly a shorter amount of time, versus the durability, right? Compiling. That's the debate of the Hall of Fame in so many ways. And so while I don't want to, I'm not saying Charlie Blackmon's a compiler, but like he's been durable. Like that was the other part of this piece. It was called A Decade of Dependability. It's actually free right now over on the DNVR.com. So you don't even need to spend 50 cents for that first month. But if you go back and look from the point in which he became an everyday regular back in 2014, only Carlos Santana has played more games than him. And Santana has been aided by, close to 200 games at DH. So if we're talking about just going out there and playing your position, since 2014, no one has ran out to their spot more than Charlie Blackmon. And again, doing it at altitude at a place that we know can beat up so many different athletes of various sports, that he's able to keep himself in that shape. Again, it belies the value and dependability that he's brought to this organization over the last decade.
And I suppose the interesting part of that is initially he had a couple of injuries sliding in his hometown into third in Atlanta, and were breaking his foot, and he had a couple of injuries early, and you were wondering, hey, is this guy going to be able to stay on the field? And now he's been one of the most resilient guys going, not just with the Rockies, but in all of baseball. Charlie's been great. He also, like I was mentioning earlier about guys that partook in the postseason as part of their legacy with the Rockies. Charlie, part of the 17 and 18 teams, clearly. Really probably, part of his prime seasons as well. It's not all that long ago. You look back, Patrick, and you say, all right, offensively, you had a great talent in Nolan at third. You had this great talent at shortstop in Trevor. Cargo was kind of on the backside still, but a threat. You had Charlie, who had emerged as an elite offensive player. And I know a lot of Rockies fans are going, all right, but Charlie's still here. Cargo's basically retired. And Nolan's in St. Louis, and it looks like Trevor's going to be in another town. And the Rockies, even the last couple of years with those guys, or some of those guys, were deficient offensively. Game changes quickly, though, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. It definitely does. It makes you feel old, especially when you go and look at the top prospect in the draft and you go, Andrew Jones's son. wasn't he just at, playing center field at Yankee Stadium and down in Atlanta? And CC Sabathia's son signed to play at Georgia Tech. So it'd be interesting to get Charlie's take on that. And Matt Holliday, I mean, a guy who, I think he came up the other day. I know we were talking about Bo Bichette. And so Jackson Holliday is going to try to be the next Bo Bichette, a guy who used to hang around Coors Field a bit.
I'll give you another name in that family, and that's Ethan Holliday, Matt's second oldest of four, who's a couple years behind Jackson. And Ethan's already committed also to Oklahoma State. Ethan is physically bigger and stronger than Jackson. Jackson doesn't have Matt's size. I think he's built a little more like Leslie, his mom. Jackson's, I was talking about him yesterday with George Frazier, my old partner. And I think for old-time Rockies fans, they all remember the stories of when Jackson, after wins, was 2 years old in the clubhouse and hitting, swinging the bat lefty and hitting bombs. And everybody's like, my goodness, this little 2-year-old swings the bat like his dad. And now Jackson's grown up. He's a senior at Stillwater High. And there's a chance he's going to go certainly in the first 3 rounds. And I think there's a decent chance he signs too, from what I'm hearing. Don't forget, there's another Holiday coming, and Ethan Holiday, who's a really physical kid. He's got a lot of pop already.
I wrote a little bit about Jackson on the article that came out on Monday on the DNVR.com about those interesting draft angles for the Rockies, who select 10th overall. Of course, Kumar Rocker's back in the conversation, as he didn't sign last year with the Mets. And yeah, Jackson Holiday got to consider him. Maybe he can follow in the footsteps of Yorvi Torrealba's son, Yorvis, who I caught up with on Tuesday. And so that'll be an interview that comes out on Friday at noon on the DNVR Sports channel on YouTube. So it's nice. Look, it's worked for the Blue Jays, bringing back the sons of all these great, former ball players and whatnot, because they've got a pedigree, they've got the baseball IQ. It's just in their genes, and so it's cool, to see the Rockies doing a little bit more of that, and maybe doing even more of that going forward.
Yeah, you see everywhere in baseball. Earlier we were talking about college baseball, and I scoured, check on different, teammates of my, sons or guys that I've coached or what have you. And you come across other sons of big leaguers. For instance, who was I looking at? For old-time Rockies fans, remember, and this was such a hard name to pronounce because he's Cajun. Remember Danny Ardoin?
Yeah.
Ardoin.
Mm-hmm.
Well, his son is the starting catcher at the University of Texas. I mean, he is an absolute stud and hits for pop. He's got a cannon behind the plate. But in fact, the Rockies drafted him out of high school really late, but they drafted him out of high school. And now he's a star at the University of Texas. One of their assistant coaches, Troy Tulowitzki, and currently, at least as of last week, they were the number 1 team in college baseball. I saw another one. Do you remember? This is a brother. I think he's at the U of A, also a catcher. Remember Andrew Susak?
Daniel Susak, yeah.
Yeah, he's at the U of A. So
they were my pick to win the College World Series. My DraftKings Sportsbook pick of, you want slightly longer odds, and I thought, I think Chip Hale is down there, kind of taking over his old alma mater there. I like Arizona as one of those sneaky teams to get in and do some damage in Omaha.
You know what? I'm with you. I'm really thrilled for Chip Hale, one of the really good guys in baseball, and he was a great player at the U of A, and I thought that was a terrific fit for him to go down there and take over. And they play, for those that don't know, at their home field's now High Corbett, where the Rockies, was their original spring training home. They've dolled it up really nicely. I was there for a fall workout about a year or so ago before Chip ended up taking over. A quick shout out to Tanner Otremba from Cherry Creek High School. Tanner, great player, great kid, terrific family. He started his career. He was a stud for Mark Johnson and a 4-year starter, which is unheard of in high school, especially at Cherry Creek. He went down to Texas Tech, did well there, but transferred a year and a half ago to the U of A. He was the Pac-12 Player of the Week this week. For the opening weekend of college baseball. So hats off to Tanner Otremba.
Do want to take my cap off and doff it for Lightshade, Colorado Premier's dispensary, because they've got the solution that's going to leave you a little bit more well-rested, and it's Wana and their Wana Optimal's Fast Asleep Gummies. It's going to allow you to feel rested, refreshed in the morning. It's not going to knock you out with powerful drugs that leave you in a fog. It's calibrated with a formula that contains 10 milligrams of CBD and just a hint of THC that's going to leave your eyelids feeling a little bit heavy in just 5 to 15 minutes. And in 0 minutes, guess what? You can go and order your Wana Optimal's Fast Asleep Gummies at lightshade.com and get 25% off that order with code DNVR. Use code DNVR at any of Lightshade's 10, soon to be 11, Denver metro area locations. Well, Goody, you brought it up, and I was thinking about talking about it today. High Corbett Field, because we're getting close, I think, to the 30th anniversary. I think it was maybe March 2nd that the Rockies said, well, we got to train somewhere. Boom, they chose High Corbett Field. I think Saturday will be the 29th anniversary of the first year that they actually the first game that they had in spring training, which I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't Bud Black throw the first pitch against the Rockies in a spring training game? I think that might be right.
Boy, that sounds like something along those lines occurred. So I'm going to go with you.
Yeah. What are your memories of that stadium, or what have you seen it become today? Because it's going to be in use. People might not realize this for 100 years, because it was built in 1937. So we're talking 85 years ago now. And as you said, University of Arizona still uses it, and they signed a 25-year lease that's going to keep it in operational through 2042. So it's gonna hit the century mark.
I have a lot of fond memories of Tucson. I think most things always start with your family, and my kids were young, and we would go down there, for spring training, and my kids had their favorite, restaurants, the Daisy Mays, which was legendary. I'll tell you a quick story about Daisy Mays. We'll get into the ballpark, but so I think it was my first year there, I was talking to Helton about, restaurants. He goes, you got to go to this place, Daisy Mays. They grill all their wings. It's really good barbecue. It's a really cool place. And it's back before MapQuest. So Helton gave me directions.
Oh, no.
And I'm driving out there. And for those that have heard stories, Todd's a practical joker. And I'm driving out there. And it's probably 20 minutes from the High Corbett area, if you will. And you go through downtown Tucson, and now there's really no lights. Pima Community College is on my right, and I'm driving down this road, and it's pitch black. It's not like you're coming up on lights where it looks like, oh, there's probably some businesses, potentially a restaurant coming up. I'm like, that Helton, he got me, man. He got me. So I am not embellishing this at all. I see a place to turn around up on the left. I just passed Pima Community College. And for all those people that have been to Daisy Mays and frequented Tucson back in the day, they're smiling right now because they know where I'm going with this. I turn into the left, and there's a little sign that says Daisy Mays. I was turning around and going back to civilization. It's on the kind of the outskirts. And so Helton was not playing a practical joke that particular time. And it was a legendary place. I was down there with a baseball team in the offseason about a year ago. And my youngest son was with me, and we made sure he went back to Daisy Mays. It's a great place. But Aaron Cook used to be there like every night, and he'd gotten in good with the owners. He would go behind the bar and help out and serve drinks and stuff. So that was a legendary place. All right, I digress. Some of the other memories of High Corbett, the seats in the sun, they were all silver. Remember, because they're like bleachers.
Yeah.
And I'm like, for the outfielders, the ball would go up, and people, it was hard for them to see in that sunshine. It was antiquated, but it had a charm to it, and it was the Rockies, and it was the first place, and it worked. The weight room was a tent beyond the left center field wall. It was not an indoor thing. It was a tent that had, it got hot as blazes in there, as you can imagine, because it had the hard plastic or the kind of soft plastic coming down. So those are some of the memories, the little cramped in the for the clubhouse. Frazier used to show me the old clubhouse, which was really the new clubhouse. And he said when I first went there with Cleveland in spring training, all you had was a nail. You hung everything on a nail. That was your quote unquote locker. So, it worked for that period of time. But overall, from a baseball standpoint, from a training facility standpoint, I always say the Rockies, when they moved from Tucson to where they're currently situated, they went from, the proverbial outhouse to the penthouse.
Well, a workout or a weight tent definitely does sound a lot better than just the nail. So that
there
were those upgrades.
Yeah, they were moving in the right direction. But honestly, I have a lot of great memories of High Corbett and the facility. It was cozy. The executive offices were down the right field line. There was a little grassy area where little kids, sons and daughters of, executives or players could kind of play. And some, the GM or the assistant GM, they'd come out and they could lean against the fence and watch the ball game and then go back inside to their offices, down the right field line. It had a charm to it. And I remember those times and even those facilities very, very fondly, even though I knew that, if you're a Charlie Blackmon or, a Carlos Gonzalez, who actually, I think trained at both places, Helton certainly, from their standpoint, when they moved from Tucson, it didn't have to get on the long bus rides. That was the other thing I didn't mention at all.
It's an hour from Phoenix. Yeah.
It's a couple hours. And if you were playing up in Surprise, it was 3 hours. And so very few veterans, Helton wasn't getting on that bus, especially with his back later on. That just made it, you knew at some point in time, everybody was going to move into that Phoenix area. But from a training standpoint, much, much better when they moved to Scottsdale.
Yeah. You talk about the charm. And again, in the early days of the organization, that's all you knew. So it's just home. So you deal with it to a degree. But I like that. It's one of the reasons why when I think of the Cactus League ballparks, I really like Hohokam because of that more old school vibe, and not old school like, we're talking Ebbets Field, but it's just older, and they just slap some green paint on it and say, hey, yeah, this is where the A's play. But it's different than a lot of the newer fashion stadiums. So it has that bit of charm. Like Surprise is very cookie cutter. I think the Peoria Sports Complex is kind of somewhat similar to that. And you got Camelback is unique, beautiful. Salt River Fields, it's the gem of the Cactus League, hands down. And then you go on the other end of the spectrum and say, man, it's a little old, it's a little dilapidated, but it's seen a lot of really good games there. And so that's why I like Hohokam, and I like how you've been depicting High Corbett Field and the charm that it obviously had for so long.
Well, in old Scottsdale, old Scottsdale Stadium where the Giants play, it has that charm also.
Yes.
It's kind of, they keep adding seats and jerry-rigging it in. And you go and see a Giant game in March. I think I was at a Giant Cubs game one day where, the Rockies weren't playing or whatever. And it was awesome, man. The atmosphere was great. There was about 13, 14,000 people. It was tremendous, and that's what you think about when you think of spring baseball in Scottsdale. And that's why, for a variety of reasons, you and I and so many other lovers of the game, want to see this thing settled. It's not quickly now because we've already missed some spring training, but to be able to have families go down and spend some time in the Phoenix area and Scottsdale in particular, and enjoy spring training and all that it brings.
Yeah, it's still there. It's Phoenix and Scottsdale still exists, but because there's no spring training yet, it's like I can't go there yet. We can, but have to go down to Tucson, watch University of Arizona, or even Arizona State has a great baseball program. I like that stadium there. That's a little bit different the way it's kind of nestled in off the highway. And
well, they play, Patrick. I think this at the old A's complex. Right. They used to play, right on campus at Packard Stadium, which was a great little ballpark. Now you understand why Barry Bonds and going back Bob Horner and all the great Sun Devils through the years hit a lot of home runs there, but it was right across from Sun Devil Stadium. But now it's a parking lot, and they took over a couple miles away the A's old complex. But yes, to your point, and what we were talking about at the outset of the podcast, there's some great college baseball down there. Listen, Grand Canyon plays really good baseball, GCU in Central Phoenix, in addition to all of the outstanding junior college programs, Yavapai and Central Arizona and Pima. There's so many good programs in that area. So there's a lot of baseball to be seen.
We'll do a little of the ESPN Top 100 list where we have some face-off with guys, but I wanted to get your thoughts right away. I'm sure your eyes might have bugged out of your head, maybe a little bit, when you heard that Juan Soto turned down a 13-year, $350 million deal, and then realized, yeah, he might be worth a lot more than that. You think he'll be the first $400 million player?
Well, he'd be the second because Mike Trout has a $400+ million deal, doesn't he?
I think technically it might be like an extension of close to that, of 300 plus that was tacked onto it. I'm not sure. Maybe he was,
but I wouldn't say shocked because it was their initial offer. So most initial offers are turned down. I was listening to. It's interesting I listen to the PTI guys almost every day. I do it the next day actually on the podcast with Wilbon and Kornheiser. And Kornheiser has adopted, even though he's a native New Yorker, he's adopted the Nationals, having lived in our nation's capital for over 40 years. And he termed it an insult by the Nationals to think about what he said, and I'm regurgitating. It was an insult to offer Juan Soto, the great Juan Soto, only $350 million over 13 years. I wouldn't say it was an insult. I would say, and he's a Boris client, that they're saying, okay, that's great. Now we know what your starting point is, but it's going to cost a whole lot more. Very few things financially in the world of sports now shocks me, Patrick. He has a ton of leverage because what is he, 22? Is he even 22 yet?
I think he'll be playing his age 22 season. Yeah.
Okay.
And he's going to be free agent after 3 years, and he's arbitration eligible as a Super 2 guy. So
yeah, again,
he's got that advantage going for him because even if he doesn't sign any kind of extension, he's still set to make maybe $70 million more just before he even reaches free agency and arbitration. So you subtract from the total.
I don't want to go down this whole road
sure.
of the issues that are being hopefully negotiated in Jupiter. How many teams in our sport, in baseball, can be a candidate to sign a Juan Soto? Just a handful.
Yeah. Now,
if you make the football equivalent or the basketball equivalent or even the hockey equivalent, because there are, salary constraints, any one of those guys would be in play for any organization. The Rockies aren't going to say, listen, they realized that deal for Nolan was too large in terms of then being able to put other, people in place on the field. I don't know what he'll end up getting. Will he get? I imagine he'll get somewhere 400 plus. And I'll say this also: he's remarkable. I could sit there and watch his at bats all day. How he controls the strike zone, it's Barry Bonds-esque. The fact that when he does get a pitch, he hits it with great authority. He's an absolute joy to watch. I throw Mike Trout in this category also. It's not my money, all right? But those guys on a really productive evening with their teammates, it has to be in concert with their teammates, are going to get 5 at-bats. Most games, they get 4 at-bats. It's baseball. It's hard to be impactful every at-bat, every other at-bat, maybe every third at-bat, right? So you start going, man, that's a whole lot of money for a guy who only has 4 opportunities, maybe 5, to change the complexion of a game. It ain't football with a quarterback where he's got the ball a ton. It's not basketball where you go, all right, this is our guy. We're going to get the ball to KD here, all game long, and especially in the fourth quarter. I'm not saying guys shouldn't get paid. I want to see them get paid. Good for them. But if I'm sitting there writing the check, I'm like, you're gonna take $400 million, let's say, and dedicate whatever it is, almost $40 million a year to one guy, and that guy only comes up 4 or 5 times. I don't know.
But how much is it worth if he creates a new dance sensation from that move that he does in the batter's box? I mean, that's got to have some value too. No, you were right, by the way. $426 million for Mike Trout. That final series of the year, Juan Soto and the Nationals were there. And I remember going around him when that series started, asking people what the over-under was on how many hits he would get, because you couldn't get him out. And that was the talk. And I remember he almost disappointed a little bit because he didn't hit like 4 home runs. He didn't have 3 doubles, but you're right. Every time he came to the plate, you stop and looked what you were doing, because of the Soto shuffle was fantastic. And yeah, he's an exciting young ball player, and we're lucky that we get to see him, a lot more here in the National League than anything else.
I'll tell you what, it's a great question. You say, all right, if you could watch one of the myriad of great young players, I mean, really young players, and a lot of them are the sons of, but, Juan Soto, Tatis, Vladdy Jr., I'll even throw, Bo Bichette in there, obviously Ronald Acuna Jr. You say, all right, you can only watch one, or how would you rank them, however you want to make the question. For me, and I probably have a little bit of a bias, Patrick, because we see this cat more, but for me, Fernando Tatis Jr.
I would agree.
I'm not saying he may be the best. I'm not saying he's the best. I'm not saying he's not the best. It's a great argument, and we'll find out 5, 8, 10 years from now who turns out the best of this extraordinary group of young talent. But Fernando Tatis Jr., in the game of baseball, you just can't take your eyes off him.
I would have Tatis first as well. I mean, it's more of the style of play, not his style with his hair and his glasses, but just he's going to do something you may have never seen or would have thought of. And, maybe that's something that's going to, lead to an injury or something, which you hope doesn't happen. And that's one of those things he's got to figure out. Bryce Harper had that going on, I think, for a little bit in the early part of his career, being a little too aggressive, knowing where to scale it back. So when you watch Tatis, you go, I might see something I've never even thought of before. And he's going to do that. And so that there's something exciting by that he's a wild card in all the best ways possible.
He has it all. We talk about that. He has it all. You mentioned, his hair and the sunglasses. I've been around him just, a few times. I know people who work for the Padres that are around him all the time. He's a wonderful kid, evidently. He's a great looking kid. He has it all, man. And he's gifted beyond belief because he has light tower power. He can make every play a shortstop. He's becoming more consistent. I know he had some throwing errors, his first couple of years, and he has dealt with some injuries already. I mean, he's done something that's not easy to do. He went from flying his top hand, and he couldn't do that anymore because of the subluxation of his shoulder. So now he's 2 hands and keeping 2 hands through the bat, through the zone. That may seem like not a big deal, but when you've been doing this your whole life and now you're doing this, it's different. And there was no drop off, man. Remember, there was speculation he was going to miss, the rest of the year, and he came back, relatively quickly again. So yeah, he's truly that cliche worth the price of admission by himself.
He's exciting. All right, we got another face-off here for all-time greatest players on MLB's top 100 list. Do you want to mix it up with a pitcher face-off, or do you want to go with a second baseman face-off?
You set the rules, brother. Go ahead.
All right, we haven't done a pitcher yet. So, in MLB's top 100, not MLB's, in ESPN's list of top 100 ball players, they've got 2 pitchers right next to each other. Clayton Kershaw is also in this conversation, but if we narrowed it down to 2, we've got Justin Verlander at 73. and Max Scherzer at 65. Both guys still going strong. I don't know about Verlander if he's going strong just yet. We'll have to wait and see. He did get a nice little contract that suggests he's got a lot more strength left in him. But what do you feel on these two guys as far as where they rank, at least one versus the other? Who has had the better career at this point?
Okay, now you didn't so our listeners know you did not give me a heads up on this, which is fine.
No prep.
And so I'm not looking at Baseball Reference. I'm not, looking at Fangraphs. I'm just off the top of my head, who's had a better career? And these two guys are both Hall of Famers, first ballot. We know that. I'm going to say, Patrick, I'm going to say Scherzer. I'm going to say I will take Scherzer's body of work slightly over Verlander, but if I have to suffer through having Verlander in my rotation, I will gut it out.
I think that's how I would go. And you know what? With two good seasons by Verlander, I flip flop. But as of, let's say, 3 years ago, I still think Verlander would have had the edge, partially because Verlander just came on the scene. He exploded onto the scene. He's got those 2 World Series that he made with the Tigers. And so it was the Verlander show. And it really took a while for Scherzer to develop before he finally got going also with the Tigers and before he signs that deal with the Nationals. And so he's been getting better and better with age, whereas Verlander's been very consistent all throughout his career.
Yeah, and I mean Scherzer, again, I'm not looking at the numbers.
He's a freak. Yeah.
Scherzer's been a freak, and both guys are freaks because both guys have maintained high velocity well into their 30s. As Verlander's closing in on 40, it's going to be fascinating to see because he's going to be back this year, and coming off Tommy John, and is he still 98? Listen, you're splitting hairs, right?
Sure.
They've both been great. They've both been great in big moments. They've both been great for a long period of time. Power guys, punch out guys that you love to watch. Growing up, the old Sunday afternoon, it always seemed like Seaver was facing Carlton or Gibson. It was always Sunday afternoon. Like, didn't their number ever come up on a Tuesday night? I mean, of course they did, but that's Verlander and Scherzer. I mean, if the Mets are playing Houston this year in July, right, and you got Verlander on the bump and you got Scherzer on the bump, are you not? I'm in.
I think it might be next year that they are on the same schedule. It's kind of similar,
okay,
like the NL. I'm not sure, but I think NL West, of course, is playing the AL Central, and so I think it seems probably true for the AL West. They're playing the NL Central. I'm not sure. I'll have to look this up here as we go on. But yeah, you got to think those guys are going to face off at some point. But their numbers have been really similar. And again, like you said, you don't necessarily have to look at the numbers to just know how it feels as far as the careers that they've had. Verlander has pitched a little bit longer, has 36 more wins, 226 to 190. But if you look at ERA plus, Max Scherzer has the edge, 134 to 129. Strikeouts to walks, the edge goes to Scherzer. More strikeouts for Scherzer. And again, he got paid by the Mets. So very much is a matter of him kind of still being in that prime in a lot of ways. Verlander has the 2 Cy Young Awards. Scherzer has the 3. So they are both right there in this generation of the greatest pitchers during this time. And you're right. I think we would all be lucky enough to suffer through having Justin Verlander pitch for our team, every 5 days.
Yeah. That's a good comparison though.
I like those two.
Comparison, yes.
All right. Our second baseman here coming up. We've got Ryne Sandberg and Roberto Alamar. They were also 2 second basemen that were very close on the ESPN's top 100 players list. Sandberg was at 91. Alamar was at 96. This one is an interesting conversation again, just going by feel for it, where, well, what's your take on these two guys? Is there one that seems maybe head and shoulders above the other?
Again, same deal, Patrick.
Sure.
I haven't, I haven't looked at any sort of statistical analysis of both of those guys, but this one for me is more definitive. I would say that Robbie Alamar, as great as Ryan Sandberg was, Robbie Alamar was better. I also remember looking up Ryan Sandberg's splits back when people really nationally piled on Coors Field, and the fact that on the road most guys' numbers were way down. Ryan Sandberg's numbers, I believe, at Wrigley Field, a great hitter's park, especially for the 4 months where it's warmer there, were much better than his road numbers. And when I make this presentation, it's not to suggest that Ryan Sandberg wasn't tremendous. Of course he was, but I think overall Robbie Alamar as a two-way player was slightly better than Ryan Sandberg. And I'm also influenced by Jeff Houston, who I have, is my partner. He's one of my dearest friends. I have immense respect for his baseball knowledge. He played with Robbie, and he just speaks, about Robbie as if this guy was just at a completely different level than just about everybody else in the game.
And Alamar, I think, had a lot more power than we might, remember him for. Like Sandberg had the 40 home run season, which, was quite impressive. I'm not going to say it was unlike anything we had seen before, because Davey Johnson had hit, I think, 42 already by that point. So you think of Sandberg more as that power hitter, but Alamar still hit 210 home runs in his career, so trailed by about 72. And so the offensive profile is similar, but as you said, the defense, I think, was a key part of it, and postseason play with what Alamar was able to do. And again, Sandberg played the entirety of his career in Chicago, so unfortunately didn't have those same opportunities. But Alamar was a guy that every team, was coveting, and he had a couple bites at the apple in free agency with, Cleveland and Baltimore and even the Mets. So he was a highly sought after guy that was essentially a slam dunk first ballot Hall of Famer. He got in on the second one, but I mean, either one of those guys, again, are two of the greatest of their generation.
Yeah. Who in your mind, who was better? Who statistically, advanced metric wise, ranks better? I would assume it's Alamar.
Yeah. I mean, I have Alamar ahead too. I kind of thought it might've been a little bit high for Ryan Sandberg. He might be similar to last week when we had the conversation with Barry Larkin, where he might just be on the outside of the top 100 players. Again, still really great. I think Sandberg had some of those injuries where, was it maybe 95 that he missed the entire season? But, overall, Alamar was the guy that, I think the numbers favor him in general. Wins above replacement, they're neck and neck. It's 67 to 67.9. It actually favors Ryan Sandberg, who the defense metrics actually like Ryan Sandberg better than Roberto Alamar, which is a little bit shocking. But I'll say this: the one thing I always like to throw around as a fun fact when it comes to Ryan Sandberg is Michael Jordan kids. He came from a baseball family. We saw what he did trying to make it a pro with the White Sox, but his kids, Michael Jordan's kids, not because of their pop, but because of Ryan Sandberg. That was why they loved 23. And so I always thought that was a funny anecdote when it comes to Michael Jordan, the greatest of at any one sport, maybe of all time, and Ryan Sandberg, a second baseman for the Cubs. Yet, Ryan Sandberg, that's the guy I want to end up.
That was just sheer luck talking about on the High Corbett thing. So I looked and I saw that we were supposed to be talking about High Corbett. I just referenced High Corbett. This week on the podcast, and we appreciate all the downloads and spreading the word. But Tad Boyle, finish up Tony Alford Part 2, and tomorrow we launch with Tad Boyle. And Tad's team has a young team. We knew going into the season they had the nice run in the tournament last year, the blowout at Georgetown before falling to a red-hot Florida State team. But he knew they were going to be young, and they're starting to come into their own. I think they won 4 in a row on the road. They had a 3-game sweep on the road. They got Arizona State tomorrow night, and then they have the big game at home against the U of A. They seem to be referenced a number of times in our show today. They're number 2 in the country, and they're coming into the event center. So we talked to Tad about, the growth of his young team, then about recruiting overall, how, with all the things that have changed. And we also talk about this, the big sports story of the week when Juwan Howard got into it with the head coach, Coach Gard of Wisconsin. And he has some, definite opinions on, things that transpired on the handshake line. And so I think people will find it interesting. As always, because Tad's a great man. Tad's a great guy. He does it the right way.
Yeah, you talk to him in the off season, and that's a great one-on-one. But particularly now with what's going on in the news and some people saying, should there be a handshake line anymore? Should there not be? Juwan Howard fired, not fired. He's suspended for the entirety of the year. I was talking with one of our guys, Andrew Mason, and he had to go all the way back to, I think, 1978 with Woody Hayes, the last time there was any kind of incident where a coach kind of is the first guy out there with the flagrant actions and whatnot. So I'm excited for this one when it drops on Thursday morning, that one-on-one with Tad Boyle. College basketball in this state right now is really exciting.
It's great. And Patrick Justin Michael, who does a great job with DNVR covering everything CSU. There's a huge one tonight. It's not just in our state. I mean, University of Wyoming. Jeff Linder's done a marvelous job up there, and they're being led by 2 Colorado kids in their program. They have a huge one in Fort Collins, another sellout at Moby Arena. Joe Scott, it's a harder deal down at Air Force, even down the road at New Mexico, further down I-25. And we talked to Tad also about, college basketball in the Mountain States area. I'll even take Steel Boise. Leon Rice, who's a friend, who does a marvelous job up there for a number of years. This mountain time zone, the lost time zone, the flyover time zone, really good college hoops in this part of the world, if you will. And we discussed that on the podcast also.
It's another great one. Make sure you download and subscribe to the Drew Goodman podcast. Follow him over on Twitter at Drew Goodman 42. Hit him up for a cameo too, if you need that as well. Taking care of some folks during this time for birthdays. Valentine's Day is past, but there's always a good cause to give a shout out from our buddy here. Love it. And we're doing our thing over on Twitter at DNVR_Rockies. I'm at Patrick D. Lyons. And you want to do this next week again, Drew? What do you think? This was fun.
You know what? I'll do it anytime you want. You and I have a good time doing it. It's a lot of fun. I do hope my fingers are crossed. I know yours are, and every one of your many listeners is. I hope next week that the first part of you and I getting together is to talk about finally they got the damn deal done, and we're going to be talking about baseball soon, Major League Baseball. So, I got toes and fingers and, what's left of my hair crossed. So I hope that's what we're leading off with next week, brother.
Once we get that word, the shoulders are going to relax. It's going to go down a good 6 to 7 inches there. It will be a good day, and it will be a good day. We'll get to that at some point. So thanks for tuning in. As always, if you're listening to this as a podcast, go over to the DNVR Sports channel on YouTube to actually watch our semi-handsome faces have this great conversation and whatnot. It's always fun, and appreciate you listening in. But you know what they say about momentum? It's only as good as tomorrow's podcast. So I'll talk to you then.